Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games. This is a side quest. I am not your usual host. Neither am I Matt Storm, nor am I Jeff Moonen. I am Case Aiken. I am another podcast host on the Certain POV network. I've guest hosted on this show before, but you can check me out over at certainpov.com with a bunch of the other ones, so go take a look. In the meantime, Matt has started this side quest project where we all were invited to talk about a video game that meant something. And while I wouldn't say that this is the game that has meant the most to me in life, it is a game that has meant a lot to me, because today I wanted to talk about Halo Combat Evolved. And kind of, it's the kind of game that has been associated with sort of like a bro-y culture. So you see, I grew up in the DC area, and I went to private Catholic schools my whole life up until college. And the school I went to is has a bit of a reputation at the moment for some bro-y people who have gotten onto the Supreme Court. And it continued to be kind of bro-y when I was there a couple decades later. So I wanted to talk about this game because it's sort of like a weird thing. It was the Xbox came out my senior year of high school, and we had a senior lounge in my high school where we had TVs and we had video games set up. But this was the thing that changed the dynamic of my class, which was this all boy 100-ish people in the class setup, where it came out. I think it was like October or November when it came out. This was 2001, and someone brought it in, and all of a sudden the dynamic of the school, or really our class, just changed immediately. So for those who don't remember, Halo was the launch game for the original Xbox. It is a first-person shooter. It was originally meant for Mac platforms because its predecessor, Marathon, was a typical Apple game. It was the Apple version of Doom when it came out. So it was assumed that it was going to come over and be on, I think at this point this was early OS X days, or OS X, days. It might have been on the brief attempt for an Apple console that happened in the 90s or early 2000s. But suffice it to say, by the time it was actually getting close to being developed for real, Apple couldn't really get the investment. Like they got an offer from Microsoft to develop it for Xbox, and Apple, famously, Jobs was not a big fan of video games, so he's kind of pushed on it, and so didn't take them up, didn't match whatever offer they had, and so they went with Xbox, and it came out as the launch game for the original Xbox, and it was a fabulous game when it came out. I was not a big first-person shooter fan prior to this game coming out. I had played GoldenEye, I had played Perfect Dark a bit, I had played Quake and some of the other like PC ones, but I never had like a really great setup for PC games at home, and it was never a thing that I thought was going to be that big. Part of that is that I am not a good keyboard and mouse kind of video game player. I'm a big controller fan video game player. And then Halo came out, and it had the twin stick setup on the Xbox controller, so that first came out with the PlayStation 1 or DualShock controller, not the original PlayStation controller. But up until that specific controller came out, everyone just assumed you would only have one joystick. And I kind of took it as a gimmick when it first came out. And then I felt the Xbox controller, and I loved the Duke, the original Xbox controller, like that big, beefy setup. Felt great in my hands. And the two joysticks worked really well. And the weird thing is, so when you're when you're at an all boy high school, the criteria for what's cool changes a lot. Like, it doesn't matter if you like Spider-Man. Everyone kind of likes Spider-Man. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you do theater that much, although I'll get into that in a second. It doesn't matter like what thing is your thing, because there's way less pressure. Like, not 100%, not, this is a grander statement than getting into minutiae, and there's exceptions to every rule, but the quote unquote how cool you were was not really defined by your nerd interests. And so there were a lot of closet nerds who were better known for being like, an athlete who also knew girls outside of school, because like you had to go elsewhere to find them. And when this game came out, all of a sudden it rearranged the entire hierarchy of our class. because all of a sudden it went from video games being a fun thing that everyone did on the side because it was 2001 to a fun thing that literally like the leaderboards we had determined like your social power at the school. So it came out, and friends of mine who were like big first-person shooter fans all of a sudden skyrocketed to the top. You know, we had basically it was like a 4-player setup all the time, where, you know, if you did well in the game, you stayed on, or, you know, if it would be like if a lot of people were trying to play, it was the only survivor of the 4 people in the death match would be the one to continue on. And so all of a sudden, people who could consistently do well were doing great. And this was the point, you know, we were starting to turn 18, so you could theoretically call in sick for yourself. Students would call in sick and then come in just to play video games. And then they could go to a couple classes if they wanted to because they enjoyed them, but they could theoretically do that. And that was a thing that happened for us. And that took over the remainder of the year. It was probably 5 months into me playing the video game before I even touched the first person mode. And that was just because I was there on a weekend where we had like rehearsals for a show I was in. The multiplayer was the thing. And it was a really good game. I had a character avatar that I based on Mega Man, which is a series I really love. And you know, because you could customize your look and everything. And it was a lot of fun. The twin stick setup was really important to the game playing well. So that was really cool. I was very happy with that. The competitive nature was great. The weapons I thought were fun. There was obviously good ones and bad ones, but it was fairly well balanced. I was like a big fan of levels where I could grab a cloak and also a shotgun and just sort of run around sneakily, taking people out. But of course we had snipers at the school. We had people who were great with the assault rifle, all kinds of different types of players. So it was fun to sort of like experience this all. And we very collectively were like exchanging information and equally enthusiastic about this thing. There was no one who totally stepped back from the game. It all of a sudden became the focus of our social hierarchy, as I've mentioned. And that was kind of a revolutionary thing. It actually is the reason why I bought an Xbox when I went to college. It is a reason why I played that game to death. And for all of its sort of cliche elements, like it's a very basic kind of sci-fi story, it always stood out to me as just being a very well polished example of the game aspect of it. That's always stuck with me. You know, it feels in a lot of ways very similar to StarCraft or Mass Effect or plenty of other games that have that sort of basic trope of sci-fi stuff where you've got kind of like your creepy bug aliens and also your like super advanced like awesome aliens. And you know, that first game really nailed it. It led to the series being very important to me for a couple of years after Halo 2 was anxiously awaited. You know, my friend group at that point, we played that a lot because the multiplayer was theoretically better. But, I don't think the story ever like quite nailed it as good for Halo 2 or 3. Ultimately, when the 360 came out, then Reach came out, and Reach was amazing. I will stand by that Reach has the best campaign of all of them. But Halo 1 is where that all started, and I don't think there's ever been a point where the series has meant as much to me as Halo 1, so I just kind of wanted to talk about that part. It was like kind of weird having like 100 people aggressively focused on this one video game, and like I said, it kind of changed who was popular, who was cool. If someone who had previously been kind of nerdy walked in, but they were really good at Halo, people would make room for them to sit down. All of a sudden, like the seating arrangements at lunches changed to be people who were good at the game to like discuss strategies, which like groups that were not friends prior to that. All of a sudden, like there was just this massive cultural shift. And it was so fascinating to see how like a specific form of media changed a cultural landscape. And I don't want to say that it's had that impact beyond my limited circle of my little prep school in the early 2000s, but it had that for me, and I kind of wanted to share it because it was kind of cool and kind of fun and more of a story than I have for a lot of video games, which was just I liked it. So I hope that this means something to someone. And if you've never really paid attention to that game, it's worth taking a look. They've done a remaster, which I understand is pretty good. I don't think the series is ever going to really like mean as much to me or to anyone after that. Maybe check out Reach if you want something a little bit later down the line, but that first game is the one that like meant a lot, and I wanted to share why it meant a lot. So if you check it out, cool. If not, come listen to a podcast over at certainpov.com. Hopefully this meant something to you, because at the time it meant something to me. So thanks and happy gaming. Hey Nerferders, my name is Case Aiken, and for over 2 years I've hosted my show, Another Pass, where I sit down with interesting guests to talk about movies that we find fascinating but flawed. Good movies, bad movies, doesn't matter. We find ways that they could have been improved. So if you ever thought that a sequel dropped the ball by forgetting about a plotline, that an epic could have been saved by introducing the director to an editor, or that a comedy didn't work hard enough to have some substance behind the laughs, then check out Another Pass podcast at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
CPOV.
certainpov.com.